Wilson decries the overly narrow focus on the human condition during present and recent historical times, stating that this narrow epistemological focus renders the humanities rootless, remaining largely unaware and uncaring about the evolutionary events of prehistory that created the human mind, page 190, and, quote, which after all created the history on which the humanities focus. Further, the creative arts and critical analyses leave unknown and unmentioned most of the non-human physical and biological processes that churn ceaselessly around and through each of us. We remain largely blind to the environment and the forces within it that guide us to whatever destiny our activities foreordain. End quote, page 191. Art without science is dangerously inadequate for designing a better world, as is science without art. The poet T.S. Eliot's assessment, says Wilson, quote, is hard to refute. Knowledge of life obtained through fiction is only possible by another stage of self-consciousness. That is to say, it can only be a knowledge of other people's knowledge of life, not of life itself. That's T.S. Eliot, quoted by Wilson, page 189. Life itself, and how to know it, is the subject of deep ecology, living as if nature mattered. Its proponents, like Murray Bookchin, may have often come from socialist critiques of late-stage capitalism, but the metaphor it creates and the archetypes it uses have a universality about them that transcends any narrow epistemology. Editor Michael Tobias defines the broadness of deep ecology in his foreword to the book that brings together Bookchin, Herman Daly, Garrett Hardin, Arne Naess, Paolo Soleri, and others by saying, in contradistinction from the capitalist enterprise, quote, deep ecology concerns those personal moods, values, aesthetic and philosophical convictions which serve no necessarily utilitarian nor rational end. By definition, their sole justification rests upon the goodness, balance, truth, and beauty of the natural world and of human beings' biological and psychological need to be fully integrated within it. The technological and conceptual tendency of civilization has served to isolate our species from all others, save perhaps for certain rodents, insect scavengers, French poodles, Siamese cats, horses, spider plants, and marigolds. This isolation or lack of wilderness is biologically bereft of the very connections which normally assure a vital place in the planetary puzzle. The loons have been on Earth for 130 million years, whales and wolves a little less, human beings a mere 2 million years. Cybernetics and the evolution of computers adds yet another twist to human destiny, they say. This is a water planet. The first terrestrial matter was probably silicon beaches. From a computer's perspective, human beings are on Earth merely to reorganize silicon into conductive chips. From the biosphere's perspective, the whole point of Homo sapiens is their armpits, a swarm with 24.1 billion bacteria. The purpose of the brain's evolution is strictly for the transport of armpits to diversified niches, perhaps other planets. For the Earth stares out into space as is alone, aware of itself, yearning to share the gift of life. Ironically, we are the one species that can focus on the stars and for whom the stars have meant something fantastic. The biosphere is happily managed to articulate through us, and yet we tempt her with catastrophe. This paradox is also at the heart of deep ecology. That's page 7. This capacious perspective may seem to be the height of satire, and yet a little more deep thought about the matter may tempt you to see this as the only logical conclusion once you are liberated from the intense navel-staring of the capitalist, communist, socialist, humanist, anthropocentrist perspectives you have been raised to think of as truth. Certainly, the postmodern French philosopher Jean-François Lyotard came to just such a conclusion in his classic Postmodern Fables, which I was assigned to read in my graduate studies in urban planning at UCLA. He wrote about human progress, quote, it induced an eschatological representation of the history of human systems. In the long run, the open systems won out completely over all the other systems, human, organic, and physical, locked in struggle on the surface of the planet Earth. Nothing appeared able to stop or even guide their development. Crises, wars, revolutions contributed to accelerate all this, especially by giving access to new sources of energy and by establishing new control over their exploitation. It even became necessary that the open systems temper their success over other systems in order to preserve the ensemble called an ecosystem from a catastrophic deregulation.